Good morning. Welcome to morning meditations this morning. Pastor has just an appointment with a doctor today, and news is that all went well, and so he'll be taking care of some things that the doctor recommended to him, and we'll be praying for him these next couple weeks, and hopefully the Lord will improve just the health situation there, so please keep Pastor in your prayers. But today for devotion, we're going to look at Proverbs chapter 9. Proverbs 9 says, Wisdom hath builded her house, she hath hewn out her 7 pillars, she hath killed her beasts, she hath mingled her wine, she hath also furnished her table. As she hath sent forth her maidens, she crieth upon the highest places of the city. Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. As for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him, Come eat of my bread, and drink of the wine which I have mingled. Forsake the foolish, and live, and go in the way of understanding. And so it's wisdom here personified, and of course all throughout Proverbs we see just the call to wisdom. Wisdom has a feast. Everything's prepared, the feast is ready, the food, the drink, it's all there, and she's just beckoning for people to come unto her, specifically to the simple. To someone who in their mind they're a little naive, they don't have knowledge, they don't have wisdom, they don't have the understanding of God, and maybe they're not opposed to that, but they don't know any better. They haven't tried to make a conscious decision. And the Bible says that wisdom is calling out to those people. Wisdom is calling them in, not to some soup line, bread line somewhere, but to a feast. To come to wisdom, to search for God's wisdom, biblical wisdom, is to go to a feast, the Bible says. It's to be at a feast where everything is prepared, where everything is there for you. And that's the Bible idea of wisdom. And there's some things that go along with that. If we read down in Proverbs 9, the Bible says in verse 10 there, The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. The knowledge of the holy is understanding. For by me thy days shall be multiplied, and the years of thy life shall be increased. Our very life will be increased by wisdom, the Bible says. And we can take that practically, of course, and I believe that's true. But also spiritually, when we accept salvation, when we accept the knowledge of God and who He is to us and the relationship that He wants us to have with Him through salvation, that is the beginning of true wisdom. And when we accept that, we have an abundant life in a different way. We have a multiplying of length of days in a different way and in an eternal way. And the Bible says that's very important. That's what wisdom calls us to. And wisdom is calling. It's calling to the simple. It's calling to those that would hear. But the problem is, wisdom's not the only one calling. And we'll look quickly here, the end of this chapter, verse 13. A foolish woman is clamorous. She is simple and knoweth nothing, for she sitteth at the door of her house, on a seat in the high places of the city, to call passengers who go right on their way. Whoso is simple, let him turn in hither. And as for him that wanteth understanding, she saith to him that stolen waters are sweet, and bread eaten in secret is pleasant. But he knoweth not that the dead are there, and that her guests are in the depths of hell. And so there we see the other side. Although wisdom is calling, although God is calling to all of us to salvation, there's another side to that. There's the wicked side to that. And we can't simply just not make a decision. We can't just say, I'm not going to decide to go to wisdom because there's someone else calling. The folly, the foolishness, the foolish woman personified here, they're calling as well. And just like wisdom is calling from the top of the housetops and calling to all the simple, there's a foolishness, there's a folly, there's an evil in the world that is also calling just the simple mind or the unmade up mind. It's calling them to something. And it has a counterfeit feast. It has a counterfeit party of its own that the simple are being called to. And of course, we can apply this practically, and we can just see the truth of just the foolishness there and how that would affect our life practically. But of course, spiritually, it's the same way. We don't simply just decide to not accept salvation. We can't simply just be passive and just, I just don't want to decide anything for God right now. I don't want to make a decision about my future. No decision is a decision spiritually. When we decide not to follow God, when we decide not to accept His truth, when we decide not to accept His salvation, we're accepting something else. And we're accepting foolishness, we're accepting folly, and we're choosing to live our lives that way. But He knoweth not that the dead are there, and that her guests are in the depths of hell. And if that doesn't just sum up what Satan's plan is for this world, to deceive them, to trick them, to make them think that they're making up their own mind. And in the end, they end up in the depths of hell. That's where his guests end up. That's where his party ends up. And so we see two things here. And hopefully that's a help to us. As Christians, we need to live in that way. We may have accepted salvation and we may have accepted that charge, but are we continuing to live in that? In our Christian life, are we listening to wisdom? Are we listening to, which starts with the fear of the Lord, are we listening to that? Are we being led of the Bible? Or are we think that I'm a Christian, but I'm not actively pursuing that? And if we're not actively pursuing, if we're not answering that call, if we're not at that feast of wisdom, then we're going to go to that other feast. We're going to end up with folly, and we're not going to lose our salvation from or anything like that. But spiritually speaking, our life is not going to be a blessed life. It's not going to be a productive life, and we're going to end in a same type of spiritual despair as long as we're in this world, if we're attending that feast of folly. And so, just two feasts here, two calls. Two decisions to make, and there's no option to not make a decision. You're going to end up at one or the other. Do I choose to fear the Lord as the beginning of wisdom, or am I going to choose to just make my own decisions, make myself the God of my life, and end up in that place of just serving folly and serving the very tactics that Satan would have us to follow? And hopefully that's a blessing to us. God bless you. Thank you for joining us this morning.